idea. All righty, let's get it on. I've been to Romamu. I have been to BJ. I've searched all over for a place to pray. It's bad acting tonight. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it in Bria. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zumagog. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And oy vey, I've already turned gray. Everybody sing! A chance to meet you, a chance to greet you, a time to deepen what it means to belong. Let's have some fun tonight, ow! And spread some joy and light. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. All right, hop harmonica. And you know we can start because Dan has arrived. And Jay is here too. And you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Welcome everybody. Hey Jay, there's the man Dan. I'm swell with Rachel. I'm loose with Bruce. I'm not going on here. This is like too stupid. But if you ever want to ask me about my Zumagog, just ask Devorah. All right, my friends, tonight is kind of a sneak preview for a larger community discussion and a workshop that I'm going to offer at the retreat called Let's Talk About God. But you all, for those of you who are going to be coming to the retreat, you'll have a head start because tonight is all about that, talking about the G word, Dan Glazer, which I know is right up your alley. Gail Garland is here. Speaking of G words, she's a woman with two G's. All righty. And as my 8th grade teacher would say, Jay, are you going to share what you're eating with the class? Okay, good. That's Zoom is coming out with a new.
Over, yeah.
Excellent. But no, Zoom is coming out with a new a new edition of Zoom, an upgrade. I'd be able to feed each other. I'm looking forward to that. I'd rather sing together, but that's not happening. All right, my friends. So tonight, let's begin by taking a look at a midrash. A midrash that is based upon that section of Torah where Moshe asks to see God's face. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh replies. Does anybody know what divinity replies? In English or in Hebrew? No one can see my face and live. But if you do what? Yeah, come on, Devorah. If you do what? I will pass all...
in the thing of the rock.
The cleft. That's right.
Cleft of the rock.
Like,
and I will pass by and you can see my back.
I will pass all my goodness before you. So this is the line from, that's the pasuk that this midrash is based on. Okay, and I know that Devorah any second is going to spotlight me. All right, I am spotlight. Okay.
Where are they?
Rabbi Abba ben Bar Memel said, God said to Moshe, you want to know my name? I am known according to my deeds. Sometimes I am known as El Shaddai, sometimes as Tsevaot, sometimes as Elohim, and sometimes as Adonai. When I judge creation, I am called Elohim. When I make war against evil, I am called Tsevaot. When I forgive the transgression of human beings, I am called El Shaddai. And when I show compassion on my world, I am called Adonai. For any time I am called Adonai, you will find the quality of compassion. So you see, you can know me and my name according to my deeds. What is this more than hinting at? This is not a rhetorical question. This is a question I'm throwing out. So I want to encourage you to participate as fully as you can tonight. I'll go back so you can take a look at that again. There's 4 names of God, all right? El Shaddai, Tsevaot, Elohim, and Adonai, all right? So Elohim is the name that often is accompanied by any judgment. So you remember what which name for divinity is in chapter 1 of Bereshit, chapter 1 of Genesis. What is the name that creates the world? Yeah, so anybody, just unmute yourself. And there's only 12 of us here, so.
Elohim.
Elohim, right. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. And right, when God began to create, Elohim, the name of God used there. And so that is equivalent to judging, the God of judgment. You'll find that across the narrative. Why is that judgment? We're not going to go into that because we got too many other things to cover. Okay.
Why is
So
it plural? Why is
Uh,
Elohim seem to be plural?
Dan, I always count on you for asking really good questions. And so this is why I gave you such a good grade last semester.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
You are welcome. Well, you're going to get different answers from different rabbis, and and Rabbi Google will probably give you a lot of different answers. Anybody? Why Elohim is plural?
I don't know.
Nobody. All right, that's your homework assignment. I am not going to answer the question. Maybe by the end of the night, one of you will have a good answer for us. And here comes Shulamit. All right. If I say your name, you would react in such a way as to be drawn to me. In other words, hi Shulamit. You see that? Shulamit's energy, her countenance lit up, and she waved to all of us. So if we were in a room together, to add to that, and you were facing a different direction, I called out your name, you probably would turn towards me. So one use of having names, of course, is to draw another entity, in this case, a person, to us. It also it makes it more personal. And so God has many names. Some are primary names, some are personal names, some are kind of Chavivi. That's not a name of God, but it's a name that is expressing closeness and as you would a child or a very close friend. So I want to look at a number of names of God. All righty. And you're going to probably recognize all of these. Here we go. First of all, these are some of the most commonly used personal names when addressing God, either in liturgy or personal prayer. All right. So either in liturgy, and I think what is meant by that is in Tanakh, or in personal prayer. And I want to add that this list of God's names is put together by Rabbi David Zaslav. David is a friend and a colleague and has a wonderful shul in Ashland, Oregon. So Yud Hey Vav Hey, right? So look how Reb David he kind of underscores what that name is being itself. So when we say Havaya, right, and when our davening, Havaya is a permutation of Yud Hey Vav Hey. All it's the same letters, right? And Havaya certainly refers to the ground of all being, that which is the foundation, which surround us and also is within us. Then we have Yah, which I think I've mentioned many times that until I started hanging around with the Jewish renewal crowd, I never heard God's referred to as Yah. And it was such an uncomfortable thing for years for me to use that name until, wait a second, hallelujah. We do that all the time, right? El is a name for God. And later on, we're going to see El attached to the word Elyon, El Elyon, and we'll see what that means. Here's Dan's favorite name for God, Elohim, all right? Adonai Eloheinu. So this is an expression. Actually, you might look at this as name and job description, right? So Rabbi Mark, name, job description, or role that plays in my life. Adonai, name of God, our God, Eloheinu, right? So it is the same thing that is happening there. El Shaddai. El Shaddai, the nurturer. So who can tell us, and Rachel, you are not eligible for answer this question. what does Shaddai, what is Shaddaiim in modern Hebrew? And why might El Shaddai be a name of God? Mary Rita.
Because the mountains, like El Shaddai was the mountain god, and the mountains look like breasts.
Right. So if you look at two mountains next to each other, and they very well may remind you of a woman's breast. So there is the nurturing God. Adonai, my master. Adon Shali, right? So that is a combination word, right? Adon Shali, Adonai, my God or my master, because Adon is also used in a personal conversation with someone you might refer to in order to honor that person. Shekhinah, okay, Mary Rita's favorite name for God. Shekhinah is the feminine aspect or the divine presence. So we have the Mishkan, right? It's the same shoresh, the same root that Shekhinah has. So we dwell in the Mishkan, and the Shekhinah dwells within us. Shulamit.
Isn't it? Oh,
I think of Shekhinah as a separate entity from Adonai or God or whatever other names we want to call. And I think of Shekhinah as the feminine aspect of God, but as a slightly different entity. And I'm just wondering if you have any comments on that.
Oh, I do have a comment about that. That would have labeled you a, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me, anybody. A non-believer. If you were looking at a separate entity that is apart from Yud Hey Vav Hey, as opposed to an aspect of Yud Hey Vav Hey, that would make you an outcast.
And what do you think Reb Zalman would say?
Oh, absolutely, that he would agree with me. Well, hold on a second, let me ask. Reb Zalman, what do you think of Shulamit's answer? Yeah.
Okay.
All righty, moving right along here. Mary Rita, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to say the divine feminine, and I think of the tree of life, but I see all that as oneness. So I would just emphasize that what Shulamit said, but I wouldn't make a duality.
Right. So it's not a separate entity, but rather an aspect of. And keep in mind that these names, I suspect, I'm not asking you to reveal that Dan has like pet names for you, right? So we have like different names for divinity that, depending upon the context, we use those names.
Can
Okay,
I
back
ask
to,
Shulamit why she makes that distinction? Is it okay to do that?
absolutely. Shulamit, why do
I
you make
I think it might have something to do with teachings from Reb Nadja and from Ellen Cossack. Ellen, yeah, she's a great teacher. I'm sorry, my mouth is on.
Cossack. Cossack.
Because
Cossack.
thank you very much. Yes, and her husband Wayne. Because I've been taught that by various different peoples, and because it makes sense to me, and because I see it as I see Shekhinah as this amazing energy that comes in, especially on Shabbat, and when I call on that particular energy. So whether I see it as a separate entity or a portion of the divine, I don't know that for me it's important to make very much of a distinction.
Well,
Because
the Kabbalists were often accused of coming up with a system in which it looks like different gods as Elohim. But coming back to Dan's question, Elohim, why is it plural? Does that mean there's more than one God? Well, the answer is no. Adonai Echad. And so within the Melocho La'aretz Kavodo, within that there is, according to the Kabbalists, energy, like fields that all flow from the same God, from the Godhead, right? And that's the way they flow into the world. Shekhinah being is equivalent to Malchut, so that is the entryway, right? As a child passes in childbirth, right through the birth canal, that is basically the birth canal through which the life of this world is in existence and enlivened by. So again, not separate entity, but rather I would like an energy. Sometimes when I look at the spherode and the picture of the spherode, I see it as a big pinball machine, right? Which is all the energies are like bouncing off of each of these bing bong bong bong, right? And all of those energies are coming together and they're separating, and they are kind of engaged in different ways at different times.
I'm just
Bruce,
looking at.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just looking at the tree behind you. I mean, they all have the same root, but the branches come out differently.
Oh, Jay, awesome. Bruce Lynn.
Let us make man in our image after our likeness.
Well, some comments are that's the royal we,
Yeah.
Right,
Well, yeah,
right.
but it's still plural.
but it is plural. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's one answer. Thank you, Bruce. Bruce Bruce took me at my word. All righty, let's go back to the list. Anybody else have something you want to add? Okay. Let's get my face in there. All right, so now Rabbono Shel Olam, right? A master of the universe, right? And there's a beautiful, beautiful Levi Yitzchak song that goes, Rabbono Shel Olam. It's a song called Do Do. You are there. You're the east. You're the west. You're everywhere. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. If you want to Google that, you can find just very fine singers singing that. Avinu. Right. Our Father, Avinu Malkeinu. So there's another example of name and role, right? Harachaman, from the same root as rechem. So a rechem is a woman's womb. So that's the merciful place where we have all been, and we are living within the womb of the Creator, Harachaman. I've come to when I hear about the death of someone, the traditional thing to respond with is Dayan HaEmet, Baruch Dayan HaEmet, blessed is the true judge. But Rabbi Dan Goldblatt years ago shared with me that he might say sometimes Baruch HaRachmana, blessed is the merciful one, because certainly there are situations where that feels a lot gentler than God as judge. So there's those two polarities coming into play again. Hashem, the name, right? The name. What name? The name that we can't pronounce. Oh, Shulamit, would you come here too? I got a little scratch in the back right here. El Chai, the living God. Hakadosh Baruch Hu. You know, we use those all the time, certainly in prayer. So I have a couple of more pages of these names. So here's some intimate names. Abba, you know, referring to and relating to God as a father or mother, let's add, or Tata, right? That's in Yiddish, or Yedid Nefesh. So you know the beginning of a Kabbalat Shabbat. We begin with Yedid Nefesh in relating to God as our soulmate, all right, a beloved of our soul.
I have another one that
Yeah, go ahead.
might get to it, but atah, which is you, and that's atah with an aleph, but atah with an ayin is now. And I just love that intimacy of you now.
That's very nice. I've never thought of Atah being a name for God, however. Just if I said you, Mary Rita, you wasn't your name, but I have to think on that.
Yeah. Like, I love you. I
I love you too.
Yeah.
Conceptual names. These are not really names of God, but conceptual frameworks for understanding the essence of God. Anochi. So where do we know Anochi from? What is the most famous or famous? It's a like place where we find Anochi
Isn't that
at the.
burning,
What's
burning
that?
bush? The burning bush?
Uh,
No, that's
no, that's Asher Asher.
yeah.
Yeah, Asher, yeah. No, it's the very first of Aseret HaDibrot. I am Anochi. And I don't know who I learned this from, but if you look at Anochi and you take out the kaf, you have Ani Ke. If you just make a permutation, Ani Ke, which means what? I am like. I am like. And so sometimes when you read Anochi, or with any name of God, we're not pinning God down to any one thing because, well, this is where we're going actually, because it's unpronounceable and unknowable. Or is God unknowable? So Anochi is kind of like saying, you're going to have to create metaphors, right, to understand me. You're going to have to create good stories. Here's one. The whole Torah, is understood as one long name of God from the beginning to the end. I'm talking about the Chamshei Torah, the 5 books of Moses. That's God's name written out. Perhaps most famously, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. There's our burning bush reference, which this is, I will be what I will be. It has nothing to do with Popeye. I am what I am. However, if you look at other translations, especially Bruce, you can tell us better than I can. What other translations might say, I am what I am, and that is absolutely incorrect grammatically. So I'm not sure how that they've arrived at that. Ein Sof. Ein Sof, without end. And here David is saying without form, which is very helpful, because when something takes on form, it's perhaps easier to identify what that thing is. And then Hamakom. Hamakom. So what does, in the famous scene where Yaakov wakes up from his dream, he says, Yesh Hamakom, Yesh Hashem b'makom hasev, ani lo yodati, that God was in this place, Hamakom. So, and I was unaware, right? In the Hasidic unpacking of that. My ego was unaware, right? So, hamakom, the place, which is every place. Bruce.
Is Ein Sof, is that a term that is used in mysticism?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Ein Sof.
Ein Sof,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely is a Jewish mystical phrase. And tonight, maybe I'm getting into it tonight, but I don't remember. Okay, next. Titles. Okay, what are some titles for divinity? Adonai Tzvaot. Lord of hosts. What the heck does that mean? I never understood. You know, it would say that in the Silverman, which, by the way, if you remember, Adon Olam was on page 162. But I love, and the first time I understood it in a way I could grok was when I heard Reb Zalman teach Adonai Tzevaot. Tzeva is a color, right? Tzevaot, colors. So Adonai Tzevaot is the God of a diversification, right? That's exactly what happens at the beginning of creation, is it not? Right? One becomes two. Echad becomes a polarities, day and night, light and dark.
Where does the word host come from?
I don't know, Dan.
Okay.
Hasn't it been used for like an army or
Yes, absolutely.
or like the gathering of angels, like the Lord of Hosts is
Right. So you see, he says literally array.
Mhm.
In Reb David does.
Well, I have to say that Adonai Tzvaot, it's not, it was Aleph Tzvaot.
Yes,
but
that's right.
it's Ayin.
Yeah, that's correct. But we can take those liberties, as the Chassidut, they sometimes do that. They'll look at things with the equivalent of the letter that sounds the same. So I think that's where it's coming from. So you're absolutely right. Tzavaot is not colors with an aleph. Adonai tzidakenu. Yahweh is our righteousness, or our righteous one. Melech haolam. That's in every bracha, is it not? Unless we change it, which is, par for the Jewish renewal course. Melech Yachid. I'm unfamiliar with that, but Melech, again, ruler, sovereign, and of unity, Yachid. So there's the Echad is in there, right? Sharing the same shorsh. Moshiach, there's a savior. Ubore, or Habore, sorry, the creator, like Bore Pri Hagafen, the one who creates. Then, so remember, that's in present tense, creates the fruit of the vine. Chea Olamim, the life of all worlds. All right, so what worlds are those? Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, Atzilut. Adon Olam. If I knew the way, Shulamit, I would take you home. Wait a second, did Shulamit leave? Oh no, just as I have mentioned her name.
She left a message for you.
Okay, it's bedtime.
It's bedtime.
It's bedtime. I know I wasn't boring her, but it's bedtime. Adon Olam. Adon, so there's, remember before, Adonai, my Adon, my master. Here we have master of Olam, of the world. And without going into it right now, we just had celebrated Purim. And it's well known that at Purim, God's name is not mentioned. Esther, the word in Hebrew, means to be hidden. Right? So God is hidden within the book of Esther. All right, and Olam shares the same root as Ne'elam, which is also hidden or unseen or no more. right? So olam, this world is hidden, veiled within something much larger that we can't necessarily see with our eyes, but we sense with our entire being. Adon haniflaot, the master of miracles, wonder of wonders. Okay, coming in for a landing with names. Tzur Yisrael, right? The rock of Israel. And David says all divine names are actually metaphors, whether by direct association, the Lord is my shepherd, or by attributing some personified action to God, as God sows. But I wanted to make the point that I think all of Torah is one midrash and one long metaphor that's pointing at the moon, if you know what I mean by that, which is metaphors point to something that we can't quite explain, but we have to, like when we tell a story, that wonderful idea that a good mice, a good story is where the brain surprises the heart. You know, we understand it up here, and then we go, ah, Roi, my shepherd. Adonai roi lo echsar, right? In Psalm 23. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Also, Magen Avraham, shield of Abraham. That's Yaakov. No, it's Isaac. Refers to God as Magen Avraham. Magen Yishenu, shield of our salvation. Melech HaMelachim, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Does everything have to be a song with me, Devorah? And Dayan HaEmet. So there's referring to before when we, the traditional phrase that when we hear of the death of someone. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second before we have the last of God's names. Now I knew this was going to take more than one night to cover all of this that I prepared, which is great. Because now I don't have to prepare next week. Any questions, any comments? Bruce Luggan.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm trying to remember my question. Oh, yes. Who's this list by? David Cooper?
No, David Zaslav. Zaslow. David wrote a wonderful book called Jesus First Century Rabbi.
Oh. Zaslav.
Yeah, Zaslow.
L-O-W, got it.
David has something in common with me, a lot in common. We both play guitar. We're both smicha ordained by Reb Zalman, and our wives are both storytellers.
Very nice.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? Question, reflection, comment? If not, we'll move on to, I think this is the last of the names. A lot of these will be familiar. Gaal Yisrael. So, or Goel Yisrael. That's the phrase that is right at the end of Tzur Yisrael, where you're supposed to say it sotto voce. And then there be no break between that and the Amidah. Yotzer Or, the former of light. Yotzer Or uvorech hahoshech. Yotzer Hakol, the former of everything. Borei Kol Hanishamot, creator of all souls. Rabon Kol HaMasim, the master of all actions. Ba'al HaMilchamot, right? That's in Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, that we refer to God as the master of battle, the master of war. Zorei Tzedakot, sower of justice. Borei Refuot, the creator of cures. Adonai Niflaot, master of wonders. Konei HaKol, the possessor of everything. But may I point out that in modern Hebrew, a koneh is like a landlord. And so, you know, if I love that as a kind of hyperlink for myself when I'm davening the first part of the Amidah, and we refer to God with this phrase, Konei HaKol, which just reminds me that that it's something that Obama got in a lot of trouble for by saying, you didn't build this. And what he really meant, it was built on the backs or on the shoulders of everyone who came before you. And when we refer to God as Konei Hakol, everything belongs to God, which is why the rabbis teach that if you don't say a bracha, say a blessing before having something to eat, for example, you're a thief, you're a ganef, you're stealing. You're stealing. Rachel, you ever heard of that? I kind of like that because it's an intentionality that, and first of all, it stops us from wolfing down our food. But second, all of brachot, all blessings are really an intention practice. Yeah, Rachel.
It reminds me of you talking about your dad, that you had to put the kippah on.
You remembered. Good for you.
That they won't eat. Is it your dad or your granddad that did that?
No, it was my father. It was my father.
Have to have a kippah on.
Yeah. Because he was the konei habayit. You're the balabayit.
In our house too.
I once got into a lot of trouble with my dad. As a teenager, like, did I really want to be putting a kippah on every time I sat down to eat? No. And I didn't unless my father was there. But one day, he got so PO'd at me for sitting down at the table without a kippah. He did something that he never did. He turned to my mother and said, Elsie, tell your son that at my dinner table, we wear a kippah. That never went on in my house. Tell your mother, tell your son. But it did that time. Thank you, Rachel, bringing up that wonderful memory. Okay, titles describe qualities. El Elyon, God the Most High. El Tzaddik, the God of righteousness. El Emet, God of truth. El Akavod, all these els, the God of. El Rachum, right? El Rachum v'chanun, Erech Apayim, right? That's in the 13 attributes. El Roi, the God of seeing. That is, Hagar refers to God as El Roi. And Adirhu, which pretty soon, in 1 month, we're going to be singing Adirhu. Oh my gosh, I have more. Okay, wow. God's 13 attributes of mercy. All right, so that's what I was just referring to. And you might remember we really unpacked all of this when we read Rami Shapiro's book, about loving kindness. Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. If any of you want these, I have a PDF file of all of this. Just drop me a line in the chat, or else when we go back to gallery, I can just send it out to everybody by taking a screenshot of you all. Ready? Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I gotcha. Wow. All right. So last but not least, contemporary gender-neutral names of God in English. And we use, what's the thumbs down for, Dan Glazer? Explain yourself.
The gender neutral stuff. I just want to get in trouble. That's all.
Oh, you just want to get in trouble? Okay, fine.
Okay.
That's your prerogative. But we use a lot of these names in modern songs that are sung about God, but also in just referring to God. I especially like the beloved, divine presence, of course, and Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Phew! Names of God. Certainly got a lot of names. All righty. So now that we've done that, and now that Mary Rita's cat is showing his best side off, an early 12th century, most famous rabbis of all, the Rambam, Maimonides, writes in his Sefer HaMitzvot, Mitzvah Rishona mi mitzvot aseh. The first mitzvah that we are instructed to is a positive mitzvah, mitzvah aseh. Leda sheyesh sham Elohai, which means to know that there is Elohai, God, and to acquire yeda, right? The knowledge, or here I'm going to kind of just massage that a little bit, belief of the nature of God's existence. And he's basing this as it is written. Whenever you see Shene Emar, it's going to give you the proof text for what came before. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, which again, we know from where? The very first of Aseret Hadibrot, of the Ten Commandments. To understand that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the original cause and source of existence who brings all creatures into creations into being, the source of this commandment is God's statement, I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Lord, or your God. Okay? This is a great place to start because eventually we're going to end up with the polar opposite of knowing something, because my underscoring this whole teaching is uncertainty. The uncertainty of knowing whether any of this is truth with a capital T. How do we know? How can we acquire knowledge, all right, of the nature of God's existence? So 12th century is Rambam, but in the 14th century, we have Rabbi Yedaya Bedersi, who teaches only 2 centuries later, the ultimate purpose of knowing is to know that we don't know. The ultimate purpose of knowing is to know that we don't know. I think for a 14th century thinker, this is radical, right? I think it's radical to hear it that someone spoke these words then, because it's very modern. It's not jarring to our ears like so oftentimes is things that were written and understood to be so long ago. Perhaps, well, I shared in meditation today that this is my quote-unquote favorite pasuk, my favorite line from all of Torah. I think it's because it's all about uncertainty and not knowing. Where do you recognize this from? When is this said? Who says it? Anachnu lo neda ma na'avod et Hashem ad boenu shama. We will not know with what we are to worship. We're not going to know what we're going to need to worship God until we arrive there. Who says that? Go ahead, Mary Rita. Anybody, just unmute yourself.
Moses.
Moses, yeah, Moshe says that. Why? Do you remember in what's the context?
Well, Exodus 10 would be before they left Egypt.
Right. So Moshe says to Pharaoh, not only are we going to take, these livestock and this and that, we're going to take in everything. And Pharaoh kind of freaks out, thinking that they're splitting. But this is Moshe's explanation. It's like, how are we going to know what we're going to need to worship Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh until we get there? Moshe has not been given explicit directions about what kinds of sacrifices and whether I think it's pretty smart. Let's schlep everything with us, and when we get there, we'll find out. Okay. I think that, let me just finish this thought, Marietta.
I know we're doing names, but
yeah.
But they didn't.
No, we're leaving names behind now. We're heading now in a different direction.
They didn't really do sacrifices at that time, right?
That's correct. The sacrifices. There were altars, and there were and remember that there were sacrifices that were offered in Egypt, and it has been surmised that the system of sacrifices that we just began, Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, is left over from practices that the people were familiar with in Egypt. But that's all history that we're not going. But I wanted to share that this meant a lot to me when I was a rabbinical student. And I was learning, taking classes, I think you'll find some support, comfort in this, Devorah. And I think you might have said something about this to me recently, that there were classes which I was totally not interested in the content, but I made peace with it when I really, really engaged with and integrated this pasuk. I'm not going to know what I'm going to need. Maybe someday I'm going to be on Zoom with 12 like wonderful people. How would I have known that? Right? So we don't know what we're going to need until we get there. Another proof text about uncertainty. Vayomer Elohim el Moshe, and God said to Moses, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. This is in response to Moshe saying, who should I tell the people sent me? And this is the way that divinity replies. Thus you shall say, Ehyeh sent me to you. And again, what does Ehyeh mean? I will be sent me to you. Right? So there, as a verb, it's naturally something that is moving, all right? It's not stagnant. It's not something that we can point to and say, there, Israel, there is your God, as the Egel Zahav, as the golden calf, right? And finally, this is the song that we end every meditation with. And for me, this song this wasn't a song, I put it to music, this poem by John O'Donohue is our spiritual task to live Ehyeh asher ehyeh, to live in the becoming. I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. A lot of reasons why we don't do that. And for those of you who are reading the book, A Walk in the Physical, the author keeps making the point is that we are afraid to fully live out of this the wholeness of our souls. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Historian Daniel Boorstin. And then perhaps the most obvious Zen quote, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Right? So this reversion continually to beginner's mind. Does everybody know that phrase? Is there anybody who's not familiar with that phrase? It's basically a returning. Dan, is that a no? Anybody help us out? What is beginner's mind? What do we mean when we say that? When we make use of that? When we return to that place? Marlena?
No, I guess what came to me is an open mind. Like every time you sit on the meditation cushion, it's like beginner's mind.
Yeah, open mind, certainly. Yeah, that's one aspect of it for sure. Anybody else?
There are no
Yeah.
certain answers.
No certain answers. Yes. As opposed to know everything.
Let go of what you're holding on to.
Well, Jay, you should also know, the tea ceremony that you like to have in the background. There's a famous story of the man who comes to the master wanting to learn everything, and he's right. And the master says, "Well, let's have tea first." And he starts pouring the tea, and he's pouring the tea, and the tea is overflowing the cup, and it's overflowing the cup, and it's spilling all over the saucer. And the man says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! What are you doing?" And the master says, "Come back when you're not so full, of yourself, basically." Yeah. Devorah, did you have something?
Beginner's mind is, one aspect to me is being able to look at something with curiosity. So without judgment, just with curiosity.
Yeah. So, and what's the Hebrew phrase for that? Mazeh. Like, truly, it's not looking actually out of to be able to name something. It's looking for the inherent, like I think this is what Adam does when he looks around and sees the animals. He asks Mazeh, and he looks into the essence of those animals, which is why he's able to name them. Of course, this is midrash. I also like to think of beginner's mind as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel invites us to do, of blessed memory, that to live with radical amazement. And to me, that is the state of any child. The children learn, quote unquote. I think that naming Crayola colors really does children injustice. Sometimes naming things should be left alone, because then it limits the potential of that thing to be more than what we think it is, or when we say it's this, it becomes that, and nothing more. All
So I
righty.
think what I get from all this, thank you, is that we don't have assumptions. We don't have prejudgment. We don't think we know and look through that filter. So we don't look through any filters. We're just curious and open, and we don't have any presumptions. That's a beginner's mind.
Yeah, I completely agree, Dan. Obviously there are times as we're living our lives that we need to name what's going on. But that's a different thing.
Right.
Okay, so you might or may not be familiar with that the Rambam Maimonides, in his Guide to the Perplexed, teaches that the only possible way to know God, or even to have sense of get close to the totality of what we mean when we say God, is through negation. We can only say what God is not. We can't say what God is. This is what Rambam says. It is not possible, except through negation, to achieve even that limited apprehension of God, which it is in our power to achieve, right? A limited apprehension. God cannot be apprehended by the human intellect, and none but he, pardon the gender, but he responded to say true to Rambam, and none but he himself can apprehend what he is. Only God can have self-knowledge completely, and our knowledge of God consists in our knowledge that we're unable truly to apprehend God. So we have come a long way since the beginning of this session, and Rambam here seems to somewhat be contradicting himself. Is it possible to know God? Here he's saying only in a limited way. And remember, we looked at the aspects of God. And God says, you can only know me from behind. I'll pass all my goodness. That's kind of like when a boat passes you and you're on the water, and you get shaken by the wake, right? That is behind the boat. We are in God's wake. We see things in retrospect. Like that famous story when of I was carrying you, where when the man on the beach poses the question, where two sets of footsteps turned into one, where were you? You disappeared. Well, that's when I was carrying you. And so we understand how divinity works in our lives through God's action. We're trying to get to a place where we can somehow really integrate all of this to know that we can't know, but we want to know. And so we use language and silence and rituals to draw us closer, which, if you remember from last week's Devar Torah, lekarben, karbanot, sacrifices from the root to draw close. Now, hold on to your head, because your brain might explode. The Rambam continues. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makir amito. The Holy One recognizes its own true essence and knows it as it is. In other words, from the inside out, divinity understands itself fully. V'yodea ota kamo shehi, right, and knows it as it is. Ve'ino yodea b'dea shehi chutz mimeno, but it's not with an external intellect in the way that we know things. So God's not looking at God from a GPS from outside of God,
That's
but within the Godhead, within God itself. Not with an external intellect in the way that we know things, since we and our intellect are not one. Right? Kamo she'anu yodim, she'ein anu v'datenu echad. Right? Thus, aval, habor yiparach hu v'dato v'chayav echad. Hashem is simultaneously the one that knows, the one that is known, and knowing itself, all one singularity. If you can meditate on that in the Shema, wow. That Habore Yibarach Hu V'dato V'chayav Echad. God is the one that knows, the one, capital O, the one that is known, and the knowing itself, which I take to mean maybe consciousness, awareness, an alive awareness. Whew. That's a lot. I'm going to stop there for a second. I think it's kind of easy to, maybe we need to meditate on that for a second.
Well,
That
I'm
God
just,
is the one that knows, that is known, and the knowing itself. That is the meaning of Adonai Echad, right? We live within that, and we cannot possibly, with our limited ability to see, we do not have the ability to see from one end of existence to the next. But that's what divinity is, and what divinity sees, and what divinity encompasses. Go ahead, Mary Reader, before your head explodes.
Well, I was putting it into grammar, like the one that knows, the I, and then the one that is known, like that's like the third person, but still one, it's still, and then the gerund, the one, like the gerund is the one, like the knowingness is, it's all one.
Yeah, so from a human perspective, you know the expressions yira v'yahava, the fear and awe, love and awe, right? So Reb Zalman, I love his understanding of yira. So yira it means fear, like the expression fear of God. Sure, and some of you will all put the fear of God into you. You never heard that, Bruce, I'm sure. But Reb Zalman talked about, yira has the same root, the same shorish of the word ro'eh, to see, all right? Lirot, to see. So imagine, Reb Zalman teaches, you walk into a room, and it's an empty room, and you go about your business. But then you turn to see that there was someone in the room all along, that you were seen. That is yira, that you are being seen. We're not talking about some peeping Tom or an elaborate system of, of having monitors on us, right? But I think the essential question is, how differently might we act if we lived with that, kavanah, that we are seen. There's a beautiful story. I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but the punchline is, I couldn't find anywhere where I wasn't seen. Yeah,
Isn't,
Devorah.
isn't,
And then Dan. Oh, God.
When I was a kid, when I learned about God, then I was conscious all the time because I was afraid there was a tally on my life and like keeping track of everything I was doing. And so I was always conscious of what I was doing in case I was being seen, which I was, obviously. I mean, I understood that. I just didn't know where that goes, or did it really follow you for your whole life? Because like that was 60 years ago. So there's a pretty long list by now, I guess.
All right. So what I'm hearing is there's a difference between he knows when you've been sleeping, he knows when you're awake, right?
Yeah.
Between God, understanding of God, that, or karma, that we write our own books of life, and we schlep all of that, those stories, the things that we do, along with us, and that is just part of who we are, right? And all of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, well, certainly Yom Kippur, and cleansing ourselves from the accumulated schmutz, from the accumulated karma, right? Is what we're doing. You know, there's that spiritual technology every day. It's not just on Yom Kippur. It's every day of the year. So there's two different, you know, there's perhaps the pediatric understanding of the tally, you know, Devorah, that you just described, of that God, and a more nuanced, a more mature understanding that that there is a Sefer Chaim, you know, there is a book of life that we write, and that's a whole
Mhm.
other conversation. Yeah, and then
But
Mary Rita.
the other thing that was part of it was it made me aware of when I was doing things because other people did it, but I didn't really agree. It made me very
Mm.
conscious then, or of teasing the kid who everybody teased, even though I never did it. Like I figured for example, to like in this class, people picked on this kid and it made it like I couldn't do it because I knew it was wrong. And so in a way, it was a pediatric thing, but it was also a very, I don't know what the word is actually.
Good.
In a way, it was a spiritual practice. I just didn't know that.
Yeah, so that is gives rise to, you know, the question is did we create God? Why do I say that? Because we could have come up with a lot of these instruction manual that is our Torah on our own. Those are mishpatim. The chokim, those are things that are harder to understand. All right. So yeah, that's we kind of infer. Is that proper use? We sense that there are things that are right and things that are wrong from an early age, or as the young kids like to say, "lo fair." It's like not fair. The kids say that for a different reason. Dan, I saw you waving your hand, probably because you can't figure out how to hit the button on the
Exactly.
phone.
I'm on
Go.
my phone. My computer is in the shop, and so I'm on the phone, and I don't know how to do all this crazy stuff. The but yeah, I mean, we talk about God being omniscient, so you know, knows everything, sees everything, but it also, you know, people talk about the elf on the shelf. Um, if y'all have heard about that, you're always being watched, and you always, you know, the kids make sure they only do good things because the elf is watching, and they want to get gifts on Christmas. But with reference to the other thing, in terms of knowing God, um, there's a distinction between understanding, knowing, and experiencing. And that's, I guess, more of a when you get into the Kabbalistic stuff, in terms of not necessarily understanding God, but experiencing God and knowing from a connected point of view, as opposed to a separate knowing, of understanding something out there that we can get a handle on, as opposed to a connected knowing of experiencing something. And
Yeah.
that's what I think we're trying to go for, because if we get stuck in the understanding part, there's nowhere to go. There's all that uncertainty.
Dan, you are becoming a chassid. Mary Rita, forgive me. I just realized that I don't have that much more to go, and I'll be able to finish the material I prepared. So just give me a moment, and there'll probably be a few minutes at the end. Uncertainty, unknowable, right from the Zohar. The highest rung on the tree of life, the Keter, the crown of Atzilut, is called the unknowable head, Resha de lo yada ud lo it yada. The head which neither knows nor is known. So it's impossible to know completely, maybe an aspect, maybe momentarily. From a sefer called Petach Eliyahu, which is commentary on the Zohar, Petach Eliyahu v'amar, Elijah opened and said, Rabbon Almin, or Rabbono Ha'olam, Master of the world, you are the supernal of all supernals, the concealed of all concealed. Late machshava tefisa bachlal. There are no thoughts that can grasp you at all. Late machshava tefisa bachlal. There are no thoughts that can grasp you at all. And I'm trying to remember the line in liturgy that says you are, and I think Shefa Gold put it to music. Machshava. Oh, I'll think of it when I'm not trying to think of it. Okay, so coming to an end here. Again, Reb Heschel, to become aware of the ineffable is to part company with words. More than hinting that, we can talk ourselves blue in the face. We can say every line of every prayer that's ever been written. But until we look at the white spaces between the black letters, until we listen to the silence following, as Reb Shefa encourages us to do after a chant, to really steep in the silence, that's the moment where we get a glimpse, we get a sense of the totality. And finally, Reb Zalman. A real question comes from admitting Eine Yodea. I don't know. The admission of not knowing is the prelude to redemption and revelation. Maybe this is akin to what we were talking to at noon about surrendering to uncertainty. So Moshe Rabbeinu himself said, Anachnu lo nedav iman avod Hashem ad boenu shama. We won't know with what we shall serve God until we get there. So here we are. I don't know seems to be a very powerful declaration of faith. Jay, and then Mary Rita, bring us into.
I was just looking at Alessandra's chat message, and you were talking about, how do we tell what is not God? How is anything not God? If God is totality, is there anything that is not God?
Good question. I think that what that is referring to is this is what we can only with language say what God is not. That's the closest that we can get to describing God, but by using words of negation. Yes, God is everything. Maloch kol haaretz kavodo. God's presence fills all creation. But that is a statement of faith, sense, belief, whatever word you want to use, experience. When we start using words, it's a slippery slope. And so we can't say what God is, Rambam is saying, because it fixes God here. We can only say what God is not. And we can get into that further if it would help. It is a little confusing without more examples of it. Mary Rita and Devorah.
This is a little out of where we were, but it's just, I just wanted to say that I also think that it's in the relationship and in prayer that we know God and we know where we are with God. So Psalm 139 just rose up in my heart. And when I learned the Psalms, one of the things that my teacher did was to send me to different translations. So if you have the Psalms for translation for praying by Reb Zalman, his 139 is really powerful to read. And I love, it begins with, Yah, you have scanned me and discerned me, and you know when I am relaxed or agitated. And a lot, I've had people, when I've suggested it, said, oh my gosh, I just feel like I can't get away from God. And then when Brielle writes it, she puts, there is like a small chorus that is there that she puts in, and it's pause, breathe, my God, who knows me better than I know myself. And at the end, she said, and though the path may not be always clear, it is in those moments that I will pause, that I will breathe, and that I will trust in great mystery to know me better than I know myself.
Nice. Thank you. Devorah, you got a chatima for us?
I don't know if it's a chatima, it's a question or a suggestion. So if we look at that definition of God, what it reminded me of is in meditation, in certain split-second moments when I realize that I have sort of been in at one with the universe, or with like totally not conscious and totally just in, I don't know how to describe it, but that to me would be as close to being like God as is possible that I've ever that I can imagine, I guess.
You're articulating what is yearned for when we talk about dvekus or dvekut, right? This desire to cling to. Now, we don't want to be lost in, but I had that experience all the time too, Devorah. It's like the experience of being lost and found at the same time. And the minute you realize that you are in Moachin de Gadlut, I'll use that as the phrase that we were looking for, expanded consciousness. The minute you become conscious of being there, you're no longer there. So right. It is a constant, push me, pull you between being fully in the presence of and, partially in the presence of, or completely not in the presence of, or at least being conscious of it, right? So great. What a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. I think it behooves me to end with some of you might not know the melody if you're with us on Wednesday afternoons for meditation, you know it. I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would love to live like a river flows carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. A river flows carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would love to live like a river flows carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. A river flows carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. A river flows carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. My sweet and holy friends, thank you for joining me on this marvelous, magical mystery tour. Who knows what next week will bring? Early Shabbat Shalom, and may we all be blessed with good health.
Remember, you're all being washed all the time. Danny, you too.
Yeah, that's just Google.
And that this conversation is being monitored for quality control.